All right, chapter 13. Hi, Coco. Hi, Eleanor. Oh, and Maya just came on too. Hi, Maya. All right, chapter 13. You guys are right on time. Oh, I hope you were not expecting dinner, the woman said. We're poor and we don't have anything to spare. Suya, Sifan admonished. These children are our guests. Suya flushed. I'm sorry, she said. I don't mean to be so stingy. It's just that the Emperor's men, they took everything. We could have nothing at all to eat if I hadn't managed to hide this. And with those words, Suya bent to the floor and pushed aside the blankets on Sifan's bed, revealing a wood plank on the floor. Hi, Eliza. As she lifted the plank, Pinmai saw a stone had been removed from the floor to create a hiding space for a small jar. Everyone leaned in as Suya opened the jar, and the uncooked rice began to fall from it like beads from a broken necklace. Oh! Suya cried, and she quickly began to pick up the spilled rice. Pinmai knelt down to help her. Their eyes met, and Pinmai felt very sudden kinship, or like friendship. She knew what it felt like to be worried about rice in a jar. Oh, we can't afford to lose not one grain, Suya said to her. After this is gone, we'll have nothing. I wish I could give you the magic red stone, Pinmai said, without thinking. Magic red stone? Suya said. Oh, it's nothing, Pinmai said, her throat tightening. She felt her words begin to hide, as if scurrying to the hole in the floor. This makes sense with what we know about Pinmai so far, right? She's kind of shy. Oh, that's too bad. It sounded like something from a story, Suya said with a wry smile. We could use a story. Sifan loves stories. Yes, I do, Sifan said, overhearing their conversation. Especially these days, when I would do anything to think of something other than this. He motioned to his bandaged legs and grimaced. Come, storyteller's granddaughter. Don't you have a story to share? Pinmai opened her mouth, but no sound came out. A stone of ice began to grow in her throat as she clutched at the jade bracelet. How she wished Amma were here. Amma would tell these people a story. Her safe, soothing voice would wrap them in a warm blanket. Pinmai felt a longing wash over her, and she shook her head. Yes, you do, Ishan said in his scoffing tone. Pinmai, you know every story that Amma has ever told. Suddenly, Pinmai felt everyone's eyes on her, and the stone in her throat grew and it pushed against her lungs and her heart. She tried to gulp, but the air seemed to have turned solid. Amma, Pinmai thought desperately, I need you. Blindly, she turned to run from the room in panic. But a hot hand grabbed hers. Pinmai looked down to see Sifan gazing up at her, the lines on his face painting a picture of his pain. Please, he said, please tell me a story. The heat of his hand traveled up her arm, and the ice inside her began to melt. Amma is not here, Pinmai thought. There's only me. She looked again at Sifan's pleading eyes and swallowed. When it is time for you to do something, you will do it. Amma's words echoed, untying and smoothing the knotted string of Pinmai's voice. Slowly, Pinmai nodded. She took a deep breath, and with a whisper, she started the story. The story of the red stone. After Nuwa, the goddess with the fishtail, mended the sky. You guys remember this story? The sky broke open, was flooding the earth, and Nuwa lodged herself in there, but then she turned to stone. Okay, just making sure. After Nuwa mended the sky, there were still many problems. The sea overflowed with water from the starry river of the sky and churned with monstrous beasts. The waters were in complete chaos. At that time, there was a young boy named Ku-ang. His father had been a fisherman, so the sea's transformation was devastating to them. What had once been home was now a place of peril, and the family was poverty-stricken. To help Ku-ang gather firewood to sell to other villagers. To help, Ku-ang gathered firewood to sell to other villagers. One day, while collecting wood, Ku-ang saw something, red, that was glittering on the ground. Curious, he picked it up. It was a red stone. It was small and round and smooth, and while it did not glow, it was so shiny Ku-ang could see himself reflected in it. It was rather pretty, so Ku-ang thought he would give it to his mother. He put it in his lunch bag and continued to gather wood. However, at lunchtime, there were 2 dumplings in his bag instead of 1. Ku-ang scratched his head. He was sure there had only been 1 dumpling in the morning. Had the stone done something? When he returned home that evening, instead of giving the stone to his mother as he had planned, he slipped it into the half-empty rice jar. The next morning, before his parents awoke, Ku-ang peeked into the rice jar. And guess what? The jar was full. It was the stone, Ku-ang said. So laughing, he called out to his family. But after Ku-ang told his story, his father shook his head. No, that stone does not belong to us, he said. You must return it to wherever you found it. Ashamed, Ku-ang returned to the mountain forest. When he arrived at the place where he had found the stone, he saw an old man, sitting, as if waiting for him. Was this your stone? Ku-ang asked, as he bowed and offered the stone. There are 3 things of Nuwa left on this earth, the old man said, completely ignoring Ku-ang's question. A tear, a strand of hair, and a drop of blood. You are holding the drop of blood. Ku-ang gasped and dropped the red stone in the old man's lap. The old man looked into Ku-ang's eyes. If you are pure of heart, the old man said, this stone will bring the Sea King to calm the waters. The Sea King? Ku-ang's eyes widened. If the Sea King could calm the waters, the monsters would stop coming to shore. People would not live in fear, and his father could fish again. The world could return to normal. Kind of feels like we could use a Sea King right now, huh? So our world can return to normal. But to find him, the old man said, placing the stone back in Ku-ang's hand, you must bring the stone safely to the top of the mountain north of the village. Ku-ang gulped. No one went to the northern mountain. Evil beasts plagued the way. But to have a Sea King, Ku-ang turned and began to make his way to the northern mountain. To get to the northern mountain, Ku-ang had to cross the abandoned Black Bridge. As he stepped onto it, a monstrous snake sprang up from the water, and Ku-ang saw horrible, sharp teeth coming toward him. But right before they snapped on him, the snake caught sight of Ku-ang's prize. The red stone, it hissed. You wish to go to the northern mountain. Yes, Ku-ang said. He held his head high, even though his legs trembled with fear. Do you know horrible Hai? The evil creature asked. Horrible Hai? He was the wicked bully of the village. Kuong knew Hai, and Kuong knew his cruelty far too well. Yes, Kuong nodded. I will let you pass if you agree to bring me the ears of horrible Hai's old mother, the enormous snake hissed. Or I will kill you right now. Never! Kuong shouted instantly. I have my own mother, and I will never harm another's. Then die! The snake hissed, and it seized Kuong with its knife-like teeth, lifted him up to the sky, and flung him away with all of its might. Kuong landed painfully on the ground, across the lake, bleeding and gasping. But the stone was still in his hand, so he pushed himself up and began to stagger towards the northern mountain. He had only made it halfway across the plain when a large shadow began to circle him. Clutching his injured side, he looked up. Above him was a gigantic, vile bird, green poison shining on its feathers. With a horrible shriek, it landed in front of Kuong, its foul smell making him flinch. The red stone! It screeched. You wish to go to the northern mountain? Yes, Kuong said. Do you know horrible Hai? The bird screamed. Kuong nodded. I will let you pass if you agree to bring me the bones of horrible Hai's younger brother, the evil bird screeched. Or I will kill you now. Never! Kuong shouted. I have my own brother, and I would never harm another's. Then die! The bird shrieked, and it grabbed Kuong with its stabbing claws, flew into the sky, and flung him away with all of its might. When Kuong was finally able to open his eyes and sit up, he saw that he sat on the northern mountain. The sea stretched below him. The red stone was in his hand, and the top of the mountain was not far away. Although he sobbed with pain, he knew he couldn't give up now. If we were collecting character traits for Kuong, I have a couple in mind. Anybody else? Swaying and stumbling, he made his way towards the top of the mountain. Just as he was reaching the top, he heard a loud shout that filled him with dread. It was horrible Hai. Kuong! Hai bellowed. Give me that stone! Kuong clutched his stone. He could not let Hai have it. Should he throw it into the sea? But then I'll never find the Sea King, Kuong thought. What should I do? The ruffian, Hai, had almost reached him. His ugly face jeered as he saw that Kuong was trapped. Give me that stone, Hai called, or I'll get you. Never! Kuong shouted, and he put the stone in his mouth and swallowed it. Immediately, an excruciating pain burned inside him. A noise bellowed from his throat, startling Hai and himself. Kuong fell backwards off the cliff, slowly turning and spinning in the air. The sky seemed to embrace him, for the wind blew around him as if coating him with a new skin. The pain from the stone began to dissipate, but Kuong could still feel its power pulsating. His whole body felt like it was bursting. Kuong stretched his hand in front of him, and with shock, he saw they had turned to claws. His arms were covered in scales, and as he plummeted downward, he saw his reflection in the strangely still water. He had turned into a dragon. The sea stirred. A wild whirlpool began to spin, its white waves becoming a herd of longma, or dragon horses, racing to herald him in. When Kuang touched the water, a crashing roar echoed and the entire sea opened, as if welcoming an honored ruler. For it was Kuang, the Sea King, had arrived. And that is the story of the Red Stone. So, the boy turned into a dragon and found himself the king of the sea, old Sai said. Pinmai looked at him in surprise, her eyes refocusing. She had gotten so lost in telling the story, she had completely forgotten that people were listening. Oh, that was great, Sifan said, his face glowing. You truly are the storyteller's granddaughter. And Pinmai, she felt a shy smile creep across her face. That red stone, Yishan said. I know we're not sure about the dragon's pearl, but do you think maybe that stone is what the emperor is looking for? He looked at her. Pinmai slowly shook her head. No, the red stone never glowed, Pinmai said. It would never have lit the night like the one that the king keeps asking for. Or the one the emperor keeps asking for, sorry. And what would the emperor want with a stone that doubles rice and dumplings? He has plenty of both. He has everything he needs, Suya said. But she was looking at Sifan's changed face with a smile. She turned to include the others, and Pinmai saw that, unlike her earlier closed-lipped smile, this one was soft and kind. Maybe the emperor would want it so he could be transformed into a dragon, old Sai suggested. I doubt it, Sifan said. Besides, didn't the old man say you had to be pure of heart? You could not say that about the emperor. Shh, Sifan, Suya said, looking as if she were afraid a soldier would jump out from the wall. She stood up and shook her head. I'll go start dinner, she said, and then added with a warm glance at the children, for all of us. One more chapter? Chapter 14. Ama fell on the stone floor of the dungeon. The guard said nothing, but lifted her so she sat against the wall and locked a long leg chain around her ankle. Then, as if he was ashamed, he took off his outer garment and laid it over her. Feeling its warmth on her, Ama looked up at him gratefully, but he did not meet her eyes. Instead, he turned and closed the door. Another lucky one, a weak voice said. Ama turned toward the voice, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. A man sat on the opposite side, like a stick of bamboo leaning against the wall. His leg also changed. Are we lucky? Ama said. Yeah, the man said. We're prisoners. It's obvious the emperor doesn't keep many. He prefers to send them to work or have us killed. Ama looked at him, noticing the whiteness of his skin and his gaunt face. Gaunt is like skinny. You have been a prisoner for a long time, she said. Yeah, I was imprisoned by the emperor when he was still known as the Tiger King, the man said with a bitter laugh. While the imperial palace is supposed to be grander, the dungeons, they're all the same. The emperor? The emperor took you with him? Ama said. Strange, is it not? The man responded. But I guess he thinks he must have need for me in the future. He said as much when he had the guards take me away. First, he ordered me executed, but then he changed his mind. Changed his mind, Amma said. Why were you being punished to begin with? Well, the man said, a giant white stone washed up from the sea, and the Tiger King ordered me to make a sculpture of himself on a horse from the stone. And you didn't make a sculpture? Amma asked. Oh, I did, the stonecutter said. My daughter and I, we worked on it for months. But when we finished, my daughter said, Father, the horse is so beautiful, but the man is so ugly. He ruins it. And I couldn't help but agree. Finally, my daughter and I couldn't bear it, so we smashed the man off the horse. And of course, the Tiger King was not very happy about that. Ah, so he was going to have you executed, Aman nodded. Then what happened? Oh, I remember it well, the man said, as if he were lost in a dream. The guards were just about to drag me away when the Tiger King said under his breath, He said I would not learn from my mistakes. Bah! And then he ordered the guards to stop and said, Put him in the dungeon. I may have need for him later. Ah, I see, Aman nodded. How interesting. The past repeats itself. The past? The stonecutter said, looking at Amma. You know of another stonecutter who shares my fate? Almost, Amma said. The story is very similar. Tell me, the stonecutter said. The story of the stone fish. Long ago, a strange stone from the sea rolled up onto the shore. It was smooth, pure white, and the width of a gong of wine. Big, big, big. The townspeople were sure it was lucky, perhaps even a gift from the Sea King himself. Finally, word of the stone came to the ears of the magistrate of the town. The magistrate, he was well known for his ruthlessness as well as his greed. He was powerful, so powerful. The magistrate was said to have the ear of the emperor's most trusted advisor, and his own son was king of a neighboring city. As a result, he ruled his area with absolute power, roaring his orders so constantly the villagers called him Magistrate Tiger. Ring a bell? When Magistrate Tiger roared for the stone, his subjects brought it without delay. The magistrate marveled at the stone's beauty. Immediately he called in the most skilled stonecutter in the village. Carve me a dragon from this stone, the magistrate ordered. An immortal dragon of power cut from this stone will be a fitting sculpture for my formal chamber. A dragon? The stonecutter gulped. Only the imperial family was allowed to use the image of a dragon. The magistrate's imperial connection was only by his son's marriage, not considered strong enough to claim a dragon. But he knew better than to protest, so he nodded and he took the stone to carve. As he carried the stone, it seemed to wriggle and squirm in his arms. Bubble, bubble, glub, 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 the stone seemed to whisper to him. Shh, the stonecutter whispered back. You are supposed to be a dragon. However, when the stonecutter began to carve, the head that formed was not a dragon's. The carved eyes gazed at him with such a reproachful stare that the stonecutter set down his tools. His young son, who often helped him with his work, stood next to the stonecutter in silence. Baba, the stonecutter's son said finally, that stone does not want to be a dragon. It wants to be a fish. The stonecutter nodded, but his head hung with heaviness. He could not carve a dragon from this stone. But Magistrate Tiger, glub, 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 the stone said. And when the stonecutter raised his head to look at the stone, he saw the beseeching eyes of a trapped creature. Poor fish, the son said. Baba, it wants to be free. The stonecutter knew he could not ignore the stone's plea. So he sighed and began to carve. 99 days later, the magistrate came to collect his dragon, and instead found a stone fish. The fish glistened as if it had just jumped out of the water. Its every scale carved with such delicacy they seemed transparent. It was a complete masterpiece. Of course, that didn't matter much to the magistrate. He was furious to be presented with a fish when he had commanded a dragon. He ordered the stonecutter to be taken away and executed. That night, the magistrate couldn't sleep. Bubba, 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 something kept whispering to him. Glub, glub, glub. The fish, the magistrate thought. In the morning, he ordered that the fish carving be brought to him. So the stonecutter's son brought it. Knowing he was carrying his father's last masterpiece, the stonecutter's son couldn't help but begin to weep. But just as his salty tears touched the stone, the fish began to wriggle and twist. Glub, glub, said the fish. It was alive. Quickly, Magistrate Tiger roared. Water! Immediately, the servants brought a wood tub filled with water from the kitchen. The stonecutter's son released the fish and it began to swim. How amazing it was! Its every curve was an iridescent medley of color. Its every movement was a joyful dance. It flipped and splashed with such delight that even the selfish magistrate smiled. All who saw the fish couldn't help but feel happy, if not only for that brief moment. The magistrate was extremely proud. His magical stone fish was talked and whispered about everywhere. His people tried to catch glimpses of it. His flattering assistants fawned over it. His noble friends admired it. There was even talk that the emperor himself was interested in seeing it. The happy fish, they murmured. Have you seen it? Magistrate Tiger has a happy fish. It's too bad the fish swims in such a humble home, one of the magistrate's assistants said. A wooden kitchen tub does not seem fitting for a creature. Yeah, Magistrate Tiger said, struck by the thought. You're right. Have the finest gong brought here. The fish shall have a new home. Soon, a decorated gong was brought to the magistrate's chamber and filled with water. But as the servant lifted the fish, it writhed and twisted, jumping out of the servant's hands. Crack! The fish lay lifeless on the floor. Now it was broken pieces of stone. The magistrate held the stone parts in his hands and tried to fit them back together. My fish! He cried. My fish! Get the stonecutter to come fix it. The others stared and gulped. We cannot, one said finally. You had the stonecutter put to death, and there's no one else skilled enough to mend it. The magistrate was silent for a moment, realizing the truth of his assistant's words. He gave a roar of rage, perhaps cursing himself for his own lack of vision. And that is the story of the stone fish. But the stonecutter did not die, the prisoner said. His son did not know it at the time, but he was able to get away, and later they both fled the magistrate's land together. Did they? Amal said. Yes, the prisoner said with pride. I know this because that stonecutter was my ancestor. He passed his skill down from generation to generation to. And the man broke off and looked closely at Amma. His face broke out into a wide smile. I know who you are, he said, almost with glee. There is only one person other than my own grandmother who would know that story and could have told it the way you did. You must be the storyteller. I have been called that, Amma admitted. Ah, I truly am the lucky one after all, the stonecutter said. For to be in prison with the storyteller is to not be in a prison at all. And that's where we stop for today. I know, but we gotta save something for tomorrow.